I learned early that in the Hayes household, generosity was just a down payment on obedience. Yet, 72 hours before I walked down the aisle, my father finally named his price. He told me I could turn my wedding into his corporate networking event, or I could pay for every single flower myself. He thought he was tightening a leash around my neck, but standing there in his study, I realized he had actually just handed me the scissors. The salt air in Harbor Cove usually smelled like freedom to me, a crisp mix of brine and drying seaweed that cleared the lungs. But 3 days before my wedding, the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest with the weight of wet wool. I stood on the balcony of the rental cottage, clutching a binder that contained the logistics for what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Yet I felt less like a bride and more like a project manager trying to salvage a sinking ship. I am a brand and operations consultant by trade. My entire career is built on the ability to walk into a failing business, identify the structural rot, and design a strategy to fix it. I am good at it. I can look at a spreadsheet and tell you exactly where a company is bleeding. I can sit in a boardroom with screaming executives and find the quiet path to a resolution. But standing there looking out at the gray Atlantic water, I realized that for 33 years, I had been completely unable to apply those same skills to the two people who had hired me for the job of being their daughter. Graham and Lorraine Hayes did not raise children, they raised assets. It was a harsh thought, one I usually push down with a cocktail or a busy work week. But the wedding had stripped away my usual defenses. I looked down at the binder. The tab labeled budget was currently a source of nausea. When Miles and I had first gotten engaged, we sat at our chipped kitchen table in Boston and agreed on a number. It was a sensible number. It was a number that meant we could buy a house in a few years. We wanted a small ceremony in a park, a dinner at our favorite Italian place, and a great DJ. We wanted to be married. Then my parents had gotten involved. It started, as it always did, with a suggestion that sounded like generosity. "Kennedy, darling," my mother had said, her voice smooth as polished glass. "You cannot possibly have guests sit on folding chairs. It simply isn't done. Let us handle the venue. Consider it our gift. I should have known better. In the Hayes economy, there is no such thing as a gift. There are only loans with compounding interest." I closed the binder and went back inside the cottage. Miles was already awake, sitting at the small island with a mug of coffee. He looked up and smiled. That easy, crinkle-eyed smile that usually made my shoulders drop 2 inches. He was a high school history teacher, a man who spent his days trying to make teenagers care about the Reconstruction era. He was steady. He was kind. He was everything my father was not. He saw the look on my face. "Your mom called," he asked. I shook my head. "No. Just thinking. About the dinner tonight," I nodded. "Hey," he said, reaching out to take my hand. "It is just dinner, if they get weird. We eat fast. We have practiced the non-committal nod. We are experts." I squeezed his hand, grateful for him, but I knew he underestimated them. Miles came from a family where people said what they meant and hugged for no reason. He did not understand the intricate, silent warfare of the Hayes family dinner table. He did not understand that tonight was not just a meal, it was a performance review. We drove into town in silence. The restaurant my parents had chosen, the Gilded Oyster, was the kind of place where the menu did not list prices and the waiters wore jackets better tailored than my own. My parents were already seated at the best table in the house, overlooking the harbor. Lorraine Hayes was a beautiful woman in the way a marble statue is beautiful cold, flawless, and terrifying to touch. She was wearing a cream silk blouse that probably cost more than my first car. My father, Graham, sat beside her, checking his phone. He looked up as we approached, his expression shifting from business boredom to a practiced, camera-ready smile. "Kennedy," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "You look tired." "Hello to you too." "Dad," I said, taking my seat. "This is Miles." Graham gave Miles a handshake that was firm enough to be polite but brief enough to show disinterest. "Miles Carter. Good to see you." We ordered drinks. I asked for a vodka tonic. Strong. My mother ordered a white wine and then looked at me with a microscopic frown. Are you sure about the vodka? Kennedy puffy eyes on the wedding day are a tragedy. I am fine. Mom, she sighed. A tiny sound that conveyed a volume of disappointment. I just want you to look your best. We have so many important people coming. That was the opening. I felt the muscles in my back tighten. Speaking of the guests, my mother continued, reaching into her purse and pulling out a folded sheet of paper. I was looking over the seating chart you sent over. It really does not work. Darling, I took a sip of my drink, letting the burn settle in my stomach. What do you mean? Well, you have the Merriweathers seated at table 9, near the kitchen. They are my college friends. Mom, they are loud and fun. They will love being near the bar. My mother shook her head as if I had suggested serving hot dogs. The Merriweathers are fine, but you have placed the table for the North Bay directors in the back corner. That is unacceptable. These are men of influence. Kennedy, they need to be near the front. They need to feel prioritized. I froze. North Bay. I did not invite anyone from a company called North Bay. My father cleared his throat. I added them to the list last week. 7 of them, plus spouses. Dad, we talked about this. The venue has a cap. We are already over capacity. We cannot just add 14 people 3 days before the wedding. Graham looked at me, his eyes devoid of any warmth. We are not just adding people. Kennedy, we are adding the right people. You can cut some of your other friends, the ones from that little marketing job you had in your 20s. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. Those are my friends. These North Bay people, I do not even know who they are. Why are they at my wedding? It is for the family, Graham said, his voice dropping an octave. The tone he used when he was closing a deal. It is complicated, but having them there, seeing the family doing well, seeing the unity. It is important for my portfolio. I looked at Miles. He was watching my father with a look of polite horror. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, this is a wedding. It is not a networking event. We are not moving my friends to accommodate your business associates. The table went silent. A waiter appeared to pour water, the sound of the liquid hitting the crystal glass sounding like a waterfall in the sudden quiet. When the waiter left, my mother leaned forward. Kennedy, do not be difficult. We are paying for this event. We are paying for the venue, the catering, the flowers you insisted on importing. When you accept that level of support, you accept the obligations that come with it. There it was, the transaction. I thought the money was a gift. I said quietly. My father laughed. A dry, sharp bark. A gift, Kennedy. We are spending $60,000 on a party. In the real world, capital buys influence. That is how it works. You know this. You advise companies on this every day. I am not a company. Dad, I am your daughter. Then act like a grateful one, he snapped. The veneer of the happy family dinner cracked completely. My father picked up his napkin and dabbed at his mouth, though he had not eaten anything. Here is the reality, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was far scarier than a shout. We have standards. We have a reputation. This wedding is going to reflect that. I have a list of requirements that need to be met. Requirements, Miles asked, speaking for the first time. Graham ignored him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black notebook. He opened it and began to read, ticking off items on his fingers. 1. The seating chart changes. The North Bay group gets table 1 and 2. 2. The ceremony script. This collaborative partnership language you have in your vows is weak. It needs to be traditional. Obedience, respect, legacy. 3. The speeches. No open mic, only approved speakers, and I will be speaking last, for 10 minutes. 4. During your toast, you will specifically thank us for making your life and career possible. You will use the phrase, visionary guidance. He looked up at me, closing the book, and if I say no, I asked. My father took a sip of his scotch. He savored it, rolling the liquid around his mouth before swallowing. Then you can pay for it yourself. The words hung in the air between us. Excuse me, I whispered. If you want to run this show like a rebellious teenager, you can pay like an adult, Graham said calmly. We will pull every dime, the venue, the caterer, the band. I will call them tomorrow morning and cancel the checks. And do not think you can just scale it down and have a backyard barbecue. I will call your aunt, your cousins, the entire extended circle. I will tell them you refused our help because you were too selfish to honor your family. I will tell them you spit in our faces. You will be humiliated. Kennedy, you will be the bride who ruined her own wedding because she could not follow simple instructions. I sat there, feeling the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just the money, it was the cruelty. It was the absolute comfort he felt in blackmailing me. Follow our rules or pay yourself. He repeated, those are your options. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. I looked at my mother. She was busy adjusting her diamond bracelet, refusing to meet my eyes. She was complicit. She had probably helped write the list. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. I think we are done eating. I said, Kennedy, sit down, my father commanded. Come on. Miles, I said. Miles stood up immediately. Throwing his napkin on the table, we walked out of the restaurant, ignoring my father's voice calling my name. We walked past the hostess stand, out the heavy oak doors, and into the cool night air. I made it to the corner of the block before I had to stop and lean against a brick wall. Gasping for air. Breathe, Ken, breathe, Miles said, rubbing my back. They are insane, I said, my voice trembling. They are actually insane. They are bullies, Miles corrected. We drove back to the cottage in silence again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a bomb squad trying to decide which wire to cut. When we got back, I went straight to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I felt violated. It sounds dramatic, but that is how it felt. They had taken something that was supposed to be an expression of love and turned it into a hostage situation. I need a glass of water. I said, I will get it. Miles said. While he was in the kitchen, I noticed my mother's tablet sitting on the dresser. She had left it there earlier when she stopped by to drop off some gift bags for the bridesmaids. The screen was dark, but as I moved it to clear a space, a notification lit up. New email. Graham Hayes. Subject, Re-NMG, Integration Strategy / Wedding. My stomach turned over. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was an invasion of privacy. But after what had just happened at dinner, the rules of engagement had changed. I tapped the screen. She hadn't set a passcode. She never did. I opened the email chain. It was a conversation between my father and a man named Marcus Thorne, the CEO of North Bay Meridian Group. I scanned the text, my eyes widening with every line. Graham, we appreciate the invitation to the event. It will be a good opportunity to finalize the optics of the merger before the public announcement. As discussed, having access to the Hayes Family Trust liquidity is a key component of our agreement. We need to see that the assets are under unified control. Your daughter's wedding seems like the perfect backdrop to demonstrate that stability to the board. We expect the introductions to be made during the reception. Marcus. My father's reply was underneath. Marcus, consider it done. Kennedy is fully on board with the family vision. The wedding will serve as the soft launch for the partnership. We have curated the guest list to ensure the right environment. You will have full access. I dropped the tablet onto the duvet as if it were burning hot. It wasn't just about showing off. It was a deal. They were selling me. They were using my wedding to prove to these investors that they had control over the family assets that likely included the trust fund my grandmother had left for me. A trust I had never been allowed to see because my father claimed he was managing it for my protection. Miles walked in with the water. He saw my face and set the glass down. What he asked, "Read this," I said, pointing to the tablet. He picked it up and read the screen. His jaw tightened. "So we are bait," he said flatly. "We are props," I corrected. "They are merging with this company, and they need to show they have total control over the family money. That is why they need the North Bay guys at the front tables. That is why I have to give a speech thanking them for their visionary guidance. It is a script for their investors. Miles sat down next to me. He took my hands in his. Okay, he said. So what do we do? We can cancel. Seriously. We can drive to City Hall tomorrow, get married in our jeans, and go eat pancakes. We can leave them with their empty venue and their angry investors. The idea was tempting. It was so tempting. To just disappear. To deny them the audience they craved. But then I thought about the last 10 years of my life. I thought about how I had spent every Christmas walking on eggshells, every birthday trying to be grateful for gifts I didn't want, every career achievement diminished because it wasn't the path they would have chosen. If I ran away now, they would spin that too. I would be the unstable daughter who couldn't handle the pressure. They would play the victims. They would keep the narrative. No, I said. No, I am not canceling my wedding. Miles. I am not letting them take this from me. If we run, they win. They get to keep their money and their pride, and we start our marriage in hiding. Then what Miles asked, we can't pay for this. Kennedy, you heard the number, $60,000. We have savings, but that is our house down payment. If we spend it on one night, we don't spend it on their night. I said, my brain finally clicking into gear. The panic was receding, replaced by the cold, hard clarity I felt when I was diagnosing a failing business model. We spend it on ours. I stood up and began to pace the small room. They gave me an ultimatum. I said, follow the rules or pay yourself. Okay, I choose option B, but if I am paying, I am not buying their product. I grabbed my phone. I need to call Tessa. It was nearly 11 at night, but Tessa Vaughn answered on the second ring. Tessa was my best friend, my maid of honor, and the only person who knew the full extent of the Hayes family dysfunction. Hello, she said, her voice groggy. Is everything okay? No, I said. They dropped the bomb. I gave her the highlights. The dinner, the ultimatum, the email about North Bay. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, the sound of Tessa sitting up and adjusting her pillows. Okay, she said. So, scorched earth. I am scared. Tess, I admitted, my voice catching for the first time. Not about the money. I mean, the money sucks, but we can figure it out. I am scared that if I do this, if I actually call their bluff, they will cut me off. Like, really cut me off. No more holidays, no more phone calls. I will just be alone. Kennedy, Tessa said, her voice fierce. Listen to me. You are already alone. They are not with you. They are managing you. I know. But no buts. Love that requires surrender isn't love. Kennedy, it is a hostage situation. You are afraid of losing parents you don't actually have. You have bankers. You have handlers. You do not have parents. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. I sat down on the floor, leaning my back against the wall. You are right, I whispered. So, Tessa continued, her tone shifting to practical determination. If they want to play business, let's play business. You are the best operations consultant on the East Coast. Consult on your own life. What is the first step? I closed my eyes and visualized the binder, the contract. I said, exactly. I hung up the phone and looked at Miles. He was watching me, waiting. Pass me the laptop. I said, I opened my email and found the contact information for the venue coordinator, a woman named Sarah, who had been CC'd on every demanding email my mother had sent for the past 6 months. I typed out a message. Hi, Sarah. I know it is late, but I need a favor. Please send me a copy of the current itemized contract and the deposit history immediately. I need to see exactly what has been paid, what is pending, and who signed the liability clauses. Please do not copy my parents on this reply. Thanks. Kennedy. I hit send, then I opened a new spreadsheet. Miles, I said, get the binder. We are going to audit this wedding. For the next 2 hours, we went through every line item. We looked at the flowers, $8,000 for imported peonies, the band $12,000 for a 10-piece orchestra, the catering 5 courses with wine pairings, My parents had built a coronation. At 1 in the morning, my phone pinged. Sarah, bless her insomniac heart, had replied. I opened the PDF. I scanned the document, looking for the signatures and the payment schedule. What I found made me laugh out loud, a dark, humorless laugh. What is it? Miles asked. They haven't paid the balance, I said. What? Look, they paid the initial deposit 6 months ago, $5,000. The remaining balance, $55,000, is due 48 hours before the event. That is tomorrow. I looked up at Miles. They haven't paid for it yet. They were holding the payment over my head to make sure I complied at the dinner. They were never going to pay until I agreed to the terms. So we are on the hook, Miles asked, looking worried. No, I said, pointing to the bottom of the page. Look at the signature on the liability clause. It was my father's signature. Graham Hayes. He signed the contract. I said, legally, he is the client. If the bill isn't paid, the venue goes after him. Not me. I felt a plan forming. It was risky. It was terrifying. But it was the only way out. If we cancel the wedding, I said, he loses his deposit. But if we change the wedding, change it how I picked up the phone again, I am going to email Sarah back. We are going to ask what we can keep for $5,000. But the venue costs more than that just to open the doors, Miles said. Maybe, I said, but Sarah hates my mother. I saw her face last time we were there. My mother made her refold the napkins 3 times. Sarah wants this wedding to happen, but she doesn't care about the glitz. I typed a second email. Sarah, hypothetically, if the primary funding for this event were to be withdrawn tomorrow morning due to a family dispute, what is the absolute bare minimum cost to keep the room for 4 hours, no staff, no dinner service, just the space? We are looking at a restructuring. I closed the laptop. We are not going to pay $60,000. I told Miles, and we are not going to let them turn our wedding into a merger meeting. We are going to strip this thing down to the studs. Miles smiled. He walked over and kissed my forehead. I like it when you get strategic, he said. I looked out the window at the dark ocean. My parents were sleeping in their luxury suite at the Harbor Hotel, probably confident that their ultimatum had worked. They thought I was crying. They thought I was broken. They thought that by tomorrow morning, I would come crawling back, ready to read their script and seat their investors. They had forgotten who I was. I was Kennedy Hayes. I fixed broken systems for a living, and I was about to restructure the hell out of this family. I turned to Miles. We have a lot to do tomorrow, I said, but first, we need to cut the guest list. I opened the spreadsheet again. I highlighted the rows labeled North Bay Meridian Group. Delete, I said, and pressed the key. The names vanished. It was a small victory, just pixels on a screen. But it felt like taking a breath of air after being underwater for a lifetime. I highlighted my aunt's name, my cousins, the business partners, the social obligations. Delete, delete, delete. When I was done, the list was half the size. It was just the people who actually knew us, the people who would be happy for us even if we were eating pizza on paper plates. I looked at the total count. 75 people. We can feed 75 people. I said, we can. Miles agreed. I saved the file. Tomorrow. I said, we go to war, but we do it quietly. I turned off the lamp, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. My mind was racing, connecting dots I had ignored for years. My father's obsession with control, the trust fund, the timing of this wedding. It was all a puzzle, and I was finally putting the pieces together. The ultimatum was supposed to be the end of my independence. Instead, it was the beginning of my revenge, but it wouldn't be a revenge of screaming and shouting. It would be a revenge of competence. I would outplan them. I would outmaneuver them. And when they walked into that room on Saturday, expecting a coronation, they were going to find a democracy. I lay back in the dark, listening to the ocean, and for the first time in months, the knot in my chest began to loosen. Let them have their money. I thought, I'll keep the dignity. The morning sun in Harbor Cove didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like an interrogation lamp. I woke up with the kind of headache that sits behind the eyes. A dull throb reminding me that my life was currently a demolition site. But in my line of work, demolition is just the first phase of renovation. I left Miles sleeping at the cottage. He had stayed up late researching consumer protection laws. Bless him. But I needed a specialist. I drove into the town center, parking my sensible sedan in front of a brick building with a modest brass plaque, Feldman Rourke Legal Services. Nina Feldman was not the type of lawyer my parents hired. My parents hired men in $1,000 suits who spoke in hushed tones about liability shielding. Nina was a woman in her 40s with wild curly hair, a coffee stain on her sleeve, and eyes that looked like they could spot a lie from 3 blocks away. She had helped a friend of mine navigate a messy small business divorce, and she had a reputation for being a shark who preferred to swim in shallow waters. I sat in her office, which smelled faintly of vanilla and old paper, and laid it all out. The ultimatum, the wedding threats, the North Bay email. "So, let me get this straight," Nina said, leaning back in her creaky leather chair. "They are threatening to withdraw funding for a party unless you turn said party into a corporate merger announcement. Essentially, yes, and you are worried about what happens when you tell them to go to hell. I am worried about the fallout." I said, "They said they would cut me off. I need to know what that actually looks like. I need to know where I'm exposed." Nina picked up a pen and tapped it against her chin. "Well, Kennedy, in the eyes of the law, cutting you off is usually just a dramatic way of saying they stop giving you gifts. Unless you have a contract stating they owe you a monthly allowance, they can stop paying whenever they want. They can stop paying for the wedding. They can stop buying you Christmas presents. That is their right." I nodded. "I can handle that. I pay my own bills. I have my own business." "Do you?" Nina asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. I froze. "What does that mean?" "It means the wealthy families I deal with usually have more than just emotional hooks in their children." Nina said, "They have paper hooks. You say you have your own business. How did you capitalize it?" "I took out a small loan when I started." I said, "About 5 years ago. My parents. They co-signed it. They said it was a family assistance agreement to help me get a better interest rate." Nina stopped tapping the pen. "Did you ever pay it back?" "Yes." I said, 2 years ago. Every cent. And did you sign a release?" I frowned. "A release number. I just paid off the bank loan." "Kennedy," Nina said, her voice dropping to a serious, low register. "I need you to find that agreement. Right now. Do you have it digitally?" I pulled out my laptop. My hands were shaking slightly as I logged into my cloud storage. I found the folder labeled Legal, Formation, and opened the PDF. I turned the laptop around so Nina could see. She put on her reading glasses and scanned the document. For a long minute, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Then, Nina let out a short, sharp sigh. "Here it is," she said. She pointed to a paragraph on the 3rd page. Clause 4.2 Advisory Consent, in consideration of the guarantee provided herein. The guarantor. Graham and Lorraine Hayes retains the right of advisory consent regarding any merger, acquisition, or sale of equity exceeding 10% of the company's value in perpetuity, until such time as this agreement is formally dissolved by mutual writing. I stared at the words. They swam before my eyes. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already felt the sickness rising in my throat. "It means they did not just co-sign a loan," Nina said. "They bought a veto. Even though you paid back the bank, this agreement is between you and them. It says, in perpetuity. That means forever. If you ever try to sell your firm, or bring in a partner, or even take on a major investor, they have the legal right to step in and say no, or at least, they can tie you up in court claiming you didn't get their consent." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "They told me it was standard language." I whispered. "They said the bank required it." "The bank requires a guarantee." Nina said, "The bank does not care if your parents have advisory consent. Your parents added this." I sat back, feeling the cold leather of the chair against my spine. It was a trap. It had always been a trap. 5 years ago, when I was just starting out, so proud of myself for building something, they had been smiling and handing me a pen, knowing they were signing a leash onto my collar. They could use this. I said, If I embarrass them at the wedding, they could file an injunction against your business next week just to be spiteful. Nina finished. They could claim you are making reckless decisions and try to force an audit. It is a control mechanism. Kennedy, pure and simple. I felt a wave of pure, white-hot rage. It was different from the anger I had felt at the restaurant. That was reaction. This was realization. They didn't just want to control the wedding, they wanted to own me. Fix it, I said. Nina looked at me. Excuse me, draft a separation plan. I said, I want them out. I want this clause gone. I can draft a dissolution of agreement. Nina said, but they have to sign it. Why would they sign it? Because I have leverage. I said. Nina raised an eyebrow. They want this wedding. I said, they want their North Bay investors to see a happy, united family on Saturday. They want to play the benevolent patriarch and matriarch. So. I will trade them. I said, I will let them have their photo op, or at least, I will let them think they are getting their photo op, but only if they sign the dissolution first. Nina smiled. It was a predatory smile. Now that, she said, is an interesting strategy. But you have to be careful. If you push too hard before the wedding, they might blow the whole thing up. They won't. I said, I know my father. He has promised these investors a show. He cannot afford to cancel 3 days out. It would look like he lost control. He needs me to walk down that aisle more than he needs this clause. Okay, Nina said, turning to her keyboard. I will draft a clean break document. It will state that all prior financial agreements are satisfied and void. I will have it ready by this afternoon. I stood up. Thank you. Nina. One more thing, she said. Do not sign anything else. Not a birthday card, not a vendor check, nothing. Until this is resolved. Your signature is dangerous. I walked out of her office into the bright sunlight, but the world looked different. The quaint streets of Harbor Cove didn't look like a vacation spot anymore. They looked like a battlefield. I drove back to the cottage. Miles was awake, pacing the living room with his phone in his hand. Where were you? He asked. I was worried. Lawyer, I said, tossing my keys on the counter. I told him about the clause. I watched his face go from confused to horrified to furious. They own your business, he shouted. They think they do, I said calmly. We have to confront them. Miles said, we have to go to that hotel right now and throw this in their faces. This is manipulation. Kennedy, this is abuse. I know, I said, and we are going to stop it, but not by screaming. I opened my laptop again. The binder was still on the table. If we confront them now, I said, my father will just laugh. He will say I am being dramatic. He will say it is just a formality. He will gaslight us until we are dizzy, and he will still hold the check for the wedding. So what Miles asked, let him keep the check. I am counting on it. I said, I pulled up the vendor list. Nina is handling the business. I said, you and I are going to handle the wedding. I started with the florist. Petals Thorns, the owner, a woman named Janice, answered on the first ring. Hi, Janice. It is Kennedy Hayes. Oh, Kennedy, I am so glad you called. I have been trying to reach your mother. We are 48 hours out and the final deposit on the imported orchids hasn't cleared. I cannot accept the delivery until it is paid. I took a deep breath. Janice, that is actually why I'm calling. My mother will not be paying that deposit. There was a silence on the other end. I don't understand. Are you canceling? No, I said. But we are restructuring. The budget has changed. I need to know what we can do for... I looked at my bank balance on my phone. $1,500. $1,500? Janice's voice squeaked. Kennedy, the orchids alone are $8,000. Forget the orchids. I said, I don't want them. I want whatever is local, whatever is in season, and whatever you have in the cooler right now that you need to move. Greenery, wildflowers. I don't care. But the centerpieces. Janice, listen to me. I am the bride. I am telling you that if we don't switch to this budget, there is no wedding. I can write you a check for $1,500 right now, or we can wait for my mother, who is currently playing games with the money. I heard Janice sigh. It was the sigh of a small business owner who just wanted to get paid. "Okay," she said. "I have a lot of hydrangeas and eucalyptus. We can do simple runners. No tall vases." "Perfect," I said. Send me the revised invoice. I will pay it in 10 minutes. I hung up and looked at Miles. "One down," I said. We spent the next 4 hours on the phone. It was grueling. The caterer was the hardest. They had already ordered the filet mignon. "I cannot return the meat." "Kennedy," the chef told me. "I know," I said. "Serve it, but cut the staff in half. No wine service at the table. Buffet style for the sides, and cancel the raw bar." We slashed and burned. The string quartet became a playlist on a rented sound system. The rehearsal dinner at the yacht club became a reservation for 20 people at a local taco spot with a back patio. Every time I confirmed a new, lower price, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I was paying for this. Me, Kennedy. It wasn't $60,000 anymore. It was $12,000. It emptied my savings, but it cleared my conscience. By 3 o'clock, the wedding was unrecognizable. It was smaller, scrappier, and significantly less polished, and it was ours. Then came the guest list. I called Tessa. She came over with a bottle of cheap wine and a laptop. "Okay," she said. "Who is out?" "Everyone I don't know," I said. We went through the names. The vice president of North Bay gone. The cousin I hadn't seen since I was 6 gone. My father's golf partner gone. Then we started adding. I added Mrs. Higgins, my high school English teacher who lived 2 towns over. I added the guy who ran the coffee shop under my apartment in Boston. I added my old roommate from my first year in the city. These were people who didn't have capital. They didn't have influence, but they had sent me cards when I was sick. They had cheered when I started my business. They were the ones who actually knew Kennedy Hayes, not the Hayes family asset. We were just finishing the list when my phone rang. It was Sarah from the venue. "Hi, Kennedy," she said. "I just wanted to confirm the setup for the VIP room." I paused. "The what?" "The VIP cocktail hour." Sarah said, "Your mother sent over the floor plan this morning. She wants the library room cordoned off for the hour before the reception. She sent the specs for the signage." "Signage," I repeated. "Yes, for the North Bay Meridian Partnership. She wants the easel stands by the library doors, and she ordered a separate bar setup for that room. High-end scotch only." I felt the blood pound in my ears. A VIP room. At my wedding. My mother was literally building a velvet rope section to separate the important people from the rest of us. She was going to herd the investors into a private library to close the deal while my friends and I ate appetizers in the hall. Kennedy, Sarah asked. "Are we good to go on that?" I closed my eyes. If I screamed now, if I told Sarah to burn the signs, my mother would find out within the hour. She would know I was revolting. "No," I said, "not yet." I took a breath. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. I am approving the setup. But I need you to make a change to the check-in process." "Okay, I am going to send you 2 lists," I said. "One is the master list. These are the people allowed into the ceremony and the main reception. The second list is the do not admit list." I heard Sarah typing. "Okay, I am listening." "The people on the do not admit list," I said, my voice steady, "are not to be let past the front gate. I don't care if they say they are family. I don't care if they say they are investors. If their name is on that list, security turns them away, and the VIP room." Sarah asked. "Set it up," I said. "Let my mother think it is happening. Let her put up her signs." I looked at Miles and Tessa. They were watching me with wide eyes. "Because," I continued, "by the time she realizes no one is in there, it will be too late." I hung up the phone. "You are going to let her set up the room?" Tessa asked. I said. "I want her to stand in that empty room with her expensive scotch and her corporate signs. I want her to see exactly what her investment bought her. Nothing. It was petty. I knew it was petty, but after finding that clause in my business contract, I was done being the bigger person. I spent the next hour carefully segregating the spreadsheet. I moved every single North Bay executive to the do not admit list. I moved the social obligations to the do not admit list. When I was done, I had a clean, tight list of 80 people who actually loved us. I sent the email to Sarah. Subject: Final approved. Guest list: Strict enforcement. I stared at the screen for a moment before closing the laptop. It is done, I said. Miles reached out and squeezed my shoulder. You know they are going to freak out, he said. When they get there on Saturday and realize half their guests are missing. Let them, I said, but the anxiety was still there, buzzing under my skin. I needed to be sure. I needed to know that when the explosion happened, I was standing on solid ground. I need to see Nina again, I said. I need to get that dissolution document ready. I drove back to Nina's office late that afternoon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Nina handed me a folder. Here it is, she said. Termination of advisory consent and release of claims. Simple, clean, brutal. If they sign this, they have zero legal foothold in your company. How do I get them to sign it? I asked. Nina leaned forward. You catch them when they are desperate, she said. When do you see them next? The rehearsal dinner. I said, tomorrow night. Perfect, Nina said. But be careful. Kennedy, documents like this, they change relationships. Once they sign this, the dynamic is gone. You are firing your parents. I took the folder. They fired themselves. I said, they just didn't put it in writing. I walked out to my car. I placed the folder on the passenger seat like it was a loaded gun. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Lorraine, darling, please make sure the photographer knows to get candid shots of Mr. Thorne during the cocktail hour. He hates posing. I looked at the text. Mr. Thorne, the CEO of North Bay, the man she was selling me to. I typed back, I'll make a note of it. I lied. I started the car and drove toward the ocean. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow. The wedding was Saturday. The clock was ticking down. I had stripped the wedding of their money. I had stripped the guest list of their cronies. I had stripped the logistics of their control. All that was left was the final confrontation. But there was one thing nagging at me. The North Bay deal itself. Why were they so desperate for this merger? Why did they need to show off the family trust liquidity? I remembered the name Elliot Price, the retired attorney my grandmother had used. He was the only one who might know the truth about the money my father was so eager to leverage. I pulled over to the side of the road and searched for his name on my phone. Elliot Price, estate law, retired. I found an old office number that redirected to a voicemail. Hi, this is Elliot. I am out fishing. Leave a message. Mr. Price, I said into the phone. This is Kennedy Hayes, Graham Hayes' daughter. I am getting married on Saturday, and I have some questions about my grandmother's trust. My father is using it as leverage for a merger. And something feels wrong. Please call me back. I hung up. It was a long shot, but I was playing the long game now. I looked at the folder on the passenger seat again. Termination of advisory consent. Tomorrow night, at the taco place that used to be a yacht club dinner. I was going to hand that to my father, and I was going to see just how much my freedom was actually worth to him. The silence from the vendors must have been deafening for my parents. For 30 years, Graham and Lorraine Hayes had existed in a world where people jumped when they cleared their throats. They were used to the immediate email reply, the fawning voicemail, the scramble to accommodate their sudden whims. So when they called the florist to demand the importation of out-of-season peonies and were met with a politely recorded message directing all inquiries to the bride, they did not just get annoyed, they panicked. It started on Thursday morning, 48 hours before the ceremony. Miles and I were sitting on the porch of the rental cottage, drinking coffee that tasted like victory. We had successfully renegotiated 70% of the contracts. We had a plan. We had a budget we could actually afford. Then the tires crunched on the gravel. My parents' car, a silver sedan that looked too clean for the dirt road, pulled into the driveway. My father slammed his door shut with enough force to shake the frame. My mother emerged next, wearing large sunglasses and a scarf wrapped tight around her neck, looking like a celebrity avoiding paparazzi. "Here we go," Miles said. Putting his mug down, I stood up. I did not go down the stairs to meet them. I waited on the porch, It was a small power move. One I had learned in corporate negotiations: make them come to you. Kennedy, my father shouted before he even reached the steps. What the hell is going on with the florist? Janice is refusing to take my card details for the upgrade. She says the account is closed to outside changes. He marched up the stairs, his face a mottled red. My mother followed, trailing a scent of expensive perfume and anxiety. And the caterer, Lorraine added, her voice sharp and brittle. I called to add the lobster bisque for the head table, and they told me the menu was locked. Locked? I have never heard of such a thing. They stood at the top of the stairs, breathing hard, waiting for me to apologize. Waiting for me to scramble and fix the glitch in their matrix. I crossed my arms. The account is locked because the bill is paid. I said. My father blinked. Excuse me, I paid the florist. Dad, I paid the caterer. I paid the venue. I wrote the checks yesterday. Since I am the one paying, I am the one signing off on the decisions, and I decided we do not need imported peonies or lobster bisque. Graham stared at me. He looked like a man trying to process a foreign language. You paid, yes, but that is thousands of dollars. Kennedy, you do not have that kind of liquidity, not for the wedding we designed. We are not having the wedding you designed, I said, keeping my voice level, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. We are having the wedding Miles and I can afford. It is smaller, it is simpler, and it is done. My mother took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were wide, brimming with a mix of shock and fury. You canceled the upgrades, she whispered. I restructured the event. I said, restructured. My father spat the word out. You are not at work. Kennedy, this is your family. You cannot just hostile take over your own wedding. Actually, I can. I said, you gave me an ultimatum. Follow the rules or pay yourself. I chose to pay myself. Therefore, the rules are mine. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the sound of the wind in the scrub pines. My father's face went from red to a pale, dangerous gray. He took a step closer to me. You are ungrateful, he said, his voice dropping to that terrifying whisper. After everything we have done, after the schools, the connections, the loans, you embarrass us like this. Do you have any idea who is coming on Saturday? I know exactly who is coming. I said, we have investors flying in from Chicago. Graham hissed. We have the North Bay board. Do you expect them to eat? What chicken? They will eat what is served, or they can leave. I said, this is a marriage, Dad, not a board meeting. My mother let out a sob. It was a practice sound, one I had heard 1,000 times when she wanted to guilt me into submission. She brought a hand to her chest. You are throwing away family unity, she cried. Kennedy, how can you be so cruel? We just wanted to give you a beautiful day. We wanted to show the world how much we love you. And you are pushing us away. You are treating us like vendors. I felt a flicker of the old guilt, the deep wiring that told me I was a bad daughter, a selfish girl who didn't appreciate her parents' sacrifices. But then I looked at Miles. He was standing right beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. He wasn't saying anything we had agreed he wouldn't engage unless he had to, but his presence was a reminder that love didn't look like this. Love didn't come with invoices. I am not pushing you away. I said, I am inviting you to my wedding as guests, not as managers. Just come and be my parents. That is all I want. Guests, my father scoffed. You think we are just guests? We are the Hayes family. We do not just attend events. We anchor them. He pointed a finger at my face. You will fix this. Kennedy, you will call Janice back, unlock the account, and let me put the deposit down. You will reinstate the menu. You will fix the seating chart to put the North Bay directors at the front, or so help me God. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of daughter you are. I am done fixing things. Dad, I said. Graham stared at me for a long moment. Then he sneered. Fine, play your little game, but do not expect us to protect you when the fallout hits. He turned and stormed back to the car. My mother looked at me, her face a mask of tragic disappointment. I just wanted you to be happy. She lied. Then she turned and followed him. They drove away, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the air. I sank into the porch chair, my legs suddenly turning to jelly. "You did it," Miles said, sitting down next to me and taking my hand. "You actually did it. I feel sick." I said, "That is the adrenaline leaving the body." Miles said, "You were amazing." I restructured the event. That was classic. I managed a weak smile. "It is not over. He threatened to tell everyone. Let him," Miles said. But my father didn't wait. The smear campaign began less than an hour later. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from my Aunt Linda. "My father's sister, Kennedy. I just got off the phone with your father. I am hearing very disturbing things about you refusing their help and disrespecting the family traditions. Your grandmother would be heartbroken to see you acting so selfishly. We are all very disappointed." I read the text out loud, my voice shaking. "She doesn't even know what happened." I said, "He must have told her I screamed at him or something. Block her." Miles said, "I can't block my aunt." Miles, "Then do not reply." Another text came in, this time from my cousin Mike. "Hey Ken, heard you are going bridezilla and banning the family. Not cool. Mom is crying." I stared at the screen. They were mobilizing the network. This was how they kept control, by triangulating. By turning the extended family into enforcers. It was a punishment for stepping out of line. If I didn't comply, they would isolate me. I felt the urge to text back, to defend myself, to explain that I wasn't banning anyone, that I was just paying for my own wedding. I wanted to write paragraphs of explanation, but I remembered what Nina, my lawyer, had told me. Do not engage in the drama. Stick to the facts. I took a deep breath and typed the same reply to both of them. "We are looking forward to seeing everyone on Saturday. We are keeping the wedding simple and respectful. Love, Kennedy." I sent it. It felt inadequate. It felt like bringing a paper shield to a gunfight, but it was the only boundary I had left. I turned my phone over so I wouldn't see the notifications. "We need to distract ourselves," Miles said. "Let's go for a walk." We walked down to the beach. The gray sand cool under our feet. The ocean was churning, whitecaps visible in the distance. I tried to focus on the sound of the waves, but my mind was back at the cottage, worrying about what my father was doing, what lies he was spinning. When we got back an hour later, I had a missed call from Nina Feldman. I called her back immediately. "Kennedy," Nina said, her voice crisp and professional. "I have been digging into the North Bay Meridian Group. You need to know something." "What is it?" I asked. "I ran a search on their recent acquisition targets. It is not public yet, but there is chatter in the industry journals. North Bay is aggressively pursuing a contract with Ethelgard Pharmaceuticals." I stopped in the middle of the kitchen. "Ethelgard," I said. "That is my client. I had been consulting for Ethelgard for 3 years. I had helped them restructure their supply chain. I was close with their COO. "Exactly," Nina said. "And Graham knows that, doesn't he?" "Yes," I said, feeling a cold pit form in my stomach. "He asked me about them at Christmas. He asked who my contact was." "Kennedy," Nina said, her voice dropping lower. "This isn't just about using your wedding for general optics. This is a specific play. North Bay wants Ethelgard. Your father wants to deliver North Bay. They are using your wedding to get the North Bay executives in the same room as you, so your father can walk you over and say, 'This is my daughter, the one who has the ear of the Ethelgard COO.'" I felt like I had been punched. "They are selling my client list." I whispered, "They are selling you," Nina corrected. "They are positioning themselves as the gatekeepers to your professional success. If North Bay gets that contract because of an introduction made at your wedding, your father gets the credit. He becomes the kingmaker. And you become the asset he traded." I sat down heavily at the table. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about control. It was about theft. They were stealing my professional credibility, something I had built from scratch without their help, and using it to buy their own leverage. That is why they need the seating chart. I said, that is why they need the VIP room. They need to corner me. And that is why the advisory consent clause exists. Nina added, if you refuse to make the introduction, they can threaten your business legally. They have you in a pincer move. I felt a surge of nausea. It was so calculated. It was so cold. What do? I asked. You stick to the plan, Nina said. You get them to sign the dissolution agreement. You cut the legal cord. And you make sure those North Bay executives do not get anywhere near you on Saturday. I hung up the phone. I looked at Miles. He saw the look on my face. What he asked. They are trying to use me to close a deal with Ethelgard. I explained it to him. Miles listened, his face hardening with every word. When I finished, he stood up and kicked the leg of the table. That is despicable, he said. That is not parenting. That is racketeering. I know. I said. Miles paced the room, running his hands through his hair. I have to admit something, he said, stopping in front of the window. What I am scared. Ken. He turned to look at me. His eyes were dark with worry. I am scared that I'm never going to be enough to protect you from this. I look at your father, with his money and his lawyers, and his absolute certainty that he owns the world, and I feel like a substitute teacher. I feel like the man who didn't measure up. I can't write a check to make them go away. I can't outshout them. My heart broke a little. I walked over and wrapped my arms around his waist, resting my head on his chest. Miles, look at me. He looked down. You are the only thing that is real. I said, you think I want a man who acts like my father? I chose you because you are kind. I chose you because you listen. I chose you because you don't treat people like assets. But they are going to come for us. Kennedy, they are going to make our lives miserable. Let them try. I said, but I am scared too. You are, yes. I am scared that I will cave. I am scared that on Saturday, when my father looks at me with that disappointed face, I will just freeze. I will just do what he wants because it is easier than fighting. I have been trained to please them my whole life. Miles, breaking that training is the hardest thing I have ever done. Miles pulled me closer. Then we need rules, he said. Rules for the wedding, for us. Rules of engagement. He pulled back and looked me in the eye. Rule 1. No public fights. If they start screaming, we walk away. We do not engage. Agreed. I said, Rule 2. No alcohol-fueled confrontations. We stay sober enough to think. Agreed. Rule 3. No speeches that turn into propaganda. If your dad gets up and starts talking about family legacy and business synergy, I am cutting the mic. I am serious. I will pull the plug. I smiled. A genuine smile this time. I would love to see that. Rule 4, Miles said, his voice softer. We remember why we are there. We are there to get married. If everything else burns down, if the guests leave, if the food is cold, we leave as husband and wife. That is the only success metric. I nodded, feeling tears prick my eyes. The only success metric, I repeated. We held each other for a long moment, standing in the kitchen of a rented cottage while the storm of my family raged outside. I felt stronger. I felt like we were a team. But I still needed answers. I needed to understand the machinery behind my parents' confidence. Nina had found the business link, but there was still the matter of the trust fund, the mysterious pot of money my father claimed to control. The leverage he used to keep North Bay interested. I looked at the clock. It was late afternoon. I am going to call Elliot Price again. I said. I dialed the number. This time, someone picked up. Hello, a rasping, elderly male voice. Mr. Price, this is Kennedy Hayes. There was a pause. The line crackled. Kennedy, the voice said, warming slightly. Little Kennedy, although I suppose you are not little anymore. I am 33. Mr. Price, of course, time is a thief. How are you? My dear, I heard you are getting married. I said, that is actually why I'm calling. I took a breath. Mr. Price, I need to ask you about my grandmother's estate. My father, Graham. He has been telling me that the family trust is structured in a way that requires his oversight. He is using it as leverage for a merger. But something feels off. I remember you were the one who handled Grandma Eleanor's will. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of wind chimes in the background. "Graham is a creative man," Elliot said carefully, "especially when it comes to narratives that suit him." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Elliot said, "that your grandmother was a very observant woman. She loved your father, but she did not trust him. Not with the things that mattered." My heart beat faster. "Mr. Price, I need to know the truth. I am about to sever my financial ties with my parents. I need to know what I'm walking away from, or what I'm walking into." "Kennedy," Elliot said, his voice firm, "I cannot discuss the specifics over the phone. It is not appropriate. Please," I begged. "I am desperate. They are trying to turn my wedding into a boardroom." "Listen to me," Elliot said. "I have been retired for 5 years. I spend my days fishing and reading, but I still have my files, and I still have a promise I made to Eleanor." "What promise?" "She gave me a letter, Kennedy, to be delivered to you on a specific occasion." What occasion she called it, the day they try to trade love for control. I felt a chill run down my spine. The phrasing was so precise. It was exactly what was happening. She knew. I whispered. "She suspected." Elliot corrected. "She watched how they treated you. She saw the strings they attached to every gift. She worried that one day, the strings would turn into chains." I gripped the phone tightly. "Mr. Price, can you come to the wedding, please? I know it is last minute, but I need you there. I need someone who knows the truth." There was another pause. "I do not own a tuxedo anymore," Elliot said. "A suit is fine. A fishing vest is fine. Just please come." I heard him sigh, but it was a kind sigh. "I will be there, Kennedy, and I will bring the file, and the letter." "Thank you," I said, my voice cracking. "Thank you. One more thing," Elliot said. "I will not be coming alone. I need to bring someone with me. Her name is Maris Calder." "Who is she?" "She is the current executor of the dormant holdings in the estate," Elliot said. "If we are going to expose the truth, we need the person who holds the keys." I didn't understand what dormant holdings meant, but I trusted the tone of his voice. It was the tone of a man who was done with secrets. "Bring her," I said. "Bring anyone you want." I hung up the phone. "What did he say?" Miles asked. I looked at him, feeling a strange mixture of terror and relief. "He said my grandmother left a letter, for the day they try to trade love for control." Miles's eyes widened. "She predicted this. She knew them." I said. "She knew exactly who they were." I walked over to the window and looked out at the ocean again. For years, I had thought I was crazy. I had thought I was too sensitive, too ungrateful. I had thought the problem was me. But my grandmother had seen it, decades ago. She had seen the rot in my parents' love, and she had left a weapon to fight it. I felt a sudden, fierce surge of gratitude for the woman I had lost when I was 20. She hadn't left me defenseless. She had just hidden the shield until I was strong enough to lift it. Saturday. I said to the empty room, "Saturday." Everything changes. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in shadow. The battle lines were drawn. My parents had their money, their guilt trips, and their corporate sharks. But I had Miles, I had Nina, I had Elliot, and I had a letter from the grave. Friday morning broke over Harbor Cove with a deceptive calm. The sky was a bruised purple that slowly healed into a pale, innocent blue, but the air remained thick with the humidity that precedes a summer storm. I felt that same pressure in my own chest, the heavy, static charge of a confrontation waiting to snap. I left Miles at the cottage, organizing the playlist that had replaced the 12-piece orchestra, and drove to the Saltwater Cafe. It was a small, weather-beaten place on the edge of the marina, the kind of spot where fishermen drank coffee out of styrofoam cups and tourists were generally ignored. It was the last place my father would ever be caught dead, which made it the perfect place to meet Elliot Price. I saw him before I even parked. He was sitting at a metal table on the patio, wearing a faded windbreaker and a bucket hat that looked like it had survived several hurricanes. He looked older than I remembered, his skin like crumpled parchment. His hands knotted with arthritis, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, gray, and unblinking. "Mr. Price," I said, approaching the table. "Kennedy," he replied, not standing up but offering me a warm smile. "You look like Eleanor. Around the eyes." I sat down. The waitress appeared instantly with a mug of black coffee for me, as if Elliot had already ordered it. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. "I know you said you didn't want to discuss details over the phone, but I feel like I am walking through a minefield blindfolded." Elliot took a slow sip of his tea. "The minefield is mostly cardboard. Kennedy, that is the first thing you need to understand. What do you mean, your father?" Elliot began, setting his cup down with a deliberate clink, "is a man who understands the power of perception. He knows that if a shadow is cast large enough on the wall, people will believe there is a monster standing in front of the light, but often it is just a very small man making hand puppets." I leaned forward. "The trust," I whispered. "He says he controls it. He says he has to approve my marriage, my career choices, even my residence, or the funds remain locked. He is using it to impress the North Bay investors. He is telling them he has access to that capital." Elliot shook his head slightly. A look of profound distaste crossed his face. "The Hayes family trust does exist," he said, "but the terms of the trust were set by your grandmother, not your father, and Eleanor was very specific how she knew Graham's nature." Elliot said, "She knew he viewed money as a tool for leverage, not liberation. When she drafted the trust, she created a vesting schedule that had nothing to do with your father's approval. It had to do with age and character." He looked at me pointedly. "The trust vested fully on your 30th birthday. Kennedy." I stared at him. The noise of the seagulls overhead seemed to drop away. "My 30th," I repeated. "That was 3 years ago." "Correct. But Graham told me the market was down. He told me there were tax implications if we touched it. He told me he was rolling it over into a protected yield fund that required his signature." Elliot sighed. It was a heavy sound, filled with the fatigue of a man who had seen too much human greed. He lied. Kennedy, or, to be legally precise, he omitted the truth to maintain administrative control. As long as you did not ask to see the documents, as long as you trusted his word, he could continue to act as the primary trustee. He could use the existence of that money to bolster his own balance sheet in the eyes of investors like North Bay. They see the family assets, they see him at the head of the table, and they assume he owns the room. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my fingers. "So the money has been mine for 3 years. It has been waiting for you," Elliot corrected. "It is not in his accounts. It is in a separate holding. He cannot spend it. But as long as you are compliant, he can claim it as part of his managed portfolio." He leaned across the table. "If you claim it, Kennedy, if you file the paperwork to take over the trusteeship, which is your right, his liquidity narrative collapses. He loses the asset he is dangling in front of North Bay." I sat back, my mind racing. It was all smoke. The threats to cut me off, the demands for obedience, the insistence that I needed his help to pay for the wedding. It was all a performance. He wasn't paying for the wedding because he was generous. He was paying for it because he needed to keep me dependent. He needed me to feel small so he could look big. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I retired." Elliot said simply, "And frankly, Eleanor hoped you would figure it out. She wanted you to be smart enough to ask for the papers. She wrote in her letter, if she never questions him, she isn't ready for the answer." I felt a flash of shame, followed quickly by a surge of adrenaline. "I am questioning him now." I said. "Then you are ready," Elliot said. He reached into his canvas bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "I cannot give you the full file yet," he said. "There are protocols. Maris Calder, the executor I mentioned, needs to witness the transfer. She will be at the wedding. But read this." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a photocopy of a summary page from the original trust document. Beneficiary Kennedy Eleanor Hayes. Vesting condition, age 30. Trustee authority. Automatically transfers to beneficiary upon demand, post-vesting, upon demand. I looked up at Elliot. He is terrified. I realized he isn't angry. He is terrified. If I walk away, if I assert myself, his whole house of cards falls down. Elliot smiled. It was a dry, wintry smile. Bullies are always terrified. Kennedy, that is why they scream so loud. I took the paper and folded it carefully into my pocket. Thank you. Elliot, I will see you tomorrow, he said. And Kennedy. Yes, don't let them see you bleed. It excites them. I walked back to my car with a new cadence to my step. I wasn't just a bride trying to salvage a party anymore. I was a woman who had just realized the cage door had been unlocked the entire time. I sat in the driver's seat and called Nina Feldman. Nina, I said when she answered, I need you to file the LLC update. Now. The dissolution of the advisory consent clause, she asked. That, and I want you to draft a demand letter for the turnover of the Hayes Family Trust. There was a silence on the other end. Kennedy, Nina said, her voice shifting from lawyer to friend, that is a declaration of war. If I file a demand for the trust, Graham will get a notification within the hour. He will know you know. Good, I said. Are you sure it is the day before the wedding? I am done living in a fog. Nina. He has been gaslighting me for 3 years. He has been using my own money to control me. File it? Okay, Nina said. I am hitting send on the LLC dissolution now. The trust demand. I will draft it, but maybe hold off on sending it until Monday if you send it today. He might actually have a stroke. I thought about it. I didn't want to kill my father. I just wanted to disarm him. Fine, I said. File the LLC paperwork. Remove his advisory consent from my business. That will be enough of a warning shot. I hung up. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. But right behind it was a sharp, stinging grief. I shouldn't have needed a forensic accountant and a retired lawyer to figure out my relationship with my parents. I shouldn't have needed legal armor to talk to my father. I drove back to the cottage, the ocean blurring in my peripheral vision. I cried for about 2 miles hot. Angry tears that I wiped away with the back of my hand. I mourned the parents I didn't have. I mourned the fantasy of the happy family table. And then, as I pulled into the driveway, I stopped. Miles was outside, unloading bags of ice for the rehearsal dinner. He looked up and waved. I took a deep breath. I had a new family now, and I had work to do. I had barely been inside for an hour when the driveway crunched again. I looked out the window. It was my mother, alone. She was carrying a small gift bag and wearing a soft, pastel cardigan that made her look approachable, maternal. It was a costume change. The aggrieved matriarch from yesterday had been replaced by the peacemaker. I opened the door before she could knock. Mom, I said. Kennedy, she said, offering a tentative smile. Can I come in? I come in peace. White flag. I stepped aside. She walked into the small living room, her eyes darting around, judging the rental furniture, the half-packed boxes of DIY decorations, the general lack of grandeur. It is cozy, she said. It is what we like, I replied. She set the gift bag on the table. I know yesterday was heated, she said. Your father. Well, you know how he gets. He is under a lot of pressure with the merger. He just wants everything to be perfect for you. For me, I asked. Or for North Bay. She waved her hand dismissively. For the family, Kennedy, it is all the same thing. But listen, I didn't come here to argue. I came to bring you something. She reached into the bag and pulled out a velvet box. She opened it. Inside sat a pair of diamond drop earrings. They were vintage, Art Deco, stunningly heavy. I recognized them immediately. They were Great Aunt Clara's. I gasped, despite myself. They are beautiful, Mom. I want you to wear them tomorrow, Lorraine said, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was trying to create intimacy. They represent continuity, tradition. She reached out and touched my arm. Let's not ruin your day. Kennedy, please. Your father is willing to overlook the outburst yesterday. He is willing to pay the remaining balances if you just soften a little. You don't have to change everything back. Just the head table. Just the North Bay group. Let him have that win. I looked at the earrings. They were a bribe, a beautiful, sparkling bribe. If I took them and agreed, I would be bought, again. But if I refused them, she would play the victim. She would tell everyone I rejected a family heirloom. I picked up the box. I will wear them. I said. Lorraine's face lit up. Oh, darling, I knew you would be reasonable. But I cut her off. My voice hard. I am not changing the seating chart. Her smile faltered. Kennedy. No, Mom. Listen to me. I am accepting these earrings because they are family history, and I am part of this family. But I am not accepting the conditions you think come with them. I set the box down and looked her in the eye. There will be no extra guests. There will be no VIP cocktail hour. There will be no speech where I thank Dad for his visionary guidance. If you want to come, you come as my mother. If you want to network, go to a golf course. Lorraine stared at me. The softness evaporated. The peacemaker costume fell away, revealing the steel beneath. You are making a terrible mistake, she said coldly. You are embarrassing your father in front of the only people who can secure his future. His future is his problem, I said. My future is Miles. Lorraine picked up her purse. She didn't touch the earrings. She left them on the table like a discarded prop. We will see, she said. She walked out the door. As she got into her car, she turned back and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, darling, whatever you say. It was the smile of a woman who had a backup plan. I watched her drive away, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. She had given up too easily. Lorraine Hayes never retreated. She only flanked. My phone rang 10 minutes later. It was Sarah, the venue coordinator. Kennedy, Sarah sounded breathless. I just wanted to verify something. Your mother just called. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. What did she want? Sarah. She said you and she had just had a lovely conversation and that you authorized the addition of 5 guests to the front row. She gave me the names, Mr. Marcus Thorne, Mrs. Thorne. I gripped the phone. She hadn't even waited to get off my driveway before she lied. Sarah, I said, my voice deadly calm. Did she send you a written authorization from me? No. She just said, rule number 1, Sarah, if it doesn't come from my email address, it doesn't exist. So, no guests? No guests, I said. And Sarah, yes, if she tries to enter the venue with them tomorrow, your security team needs to stop them. Sarah paused. Stop the mother of the bride. Stop anyone who isn't on the list, I said. I will back you up. I will pay you a bonus. Just hold the line. Consider it held, Sarah said. I hung up and slumped onto the couch. It was exhausting. It was a game of whack-a-mole, where every time I set a boundary, they tried to dig under it. Miles came in from the back patio. He saw my face in the velvet box on the table. She tried to buy you, he asked, with earrings and a guilt trip. I said, and then she called Sarah and tried to add the North Bay crew anyway. Miles picked up the earrings. They caught the light, fracturing it into rainbows. Pretty rocks, he said. Heavy strings. We need a plan for tomorrow. I said, a physical plan. I can't be fighting her at the door while I'm in my wedding dress. Tessa arrived an hour later, carrying a clipboard and the determination of a general. We sat at the kitchen table, me, Miles, and Tessa, and we war-gamed the wedding. Okay, Tessa said, clicking her pen. We need a defensive line. The check-in team is the first barrier. I have assigned my cousin Mike, the one who works as a bouncer, to the front desk. He doesn't know your parents, and he doesn't care about family standards. He just cares about the list. Good, I said. Second, Tessa continued, we need a buffer. Someone to intercept your parents when they try to corner you. I can do it. Miles said, no. Tessa said, you are the groom. You need to be enjoying the day. We need someone they can't bully. I thought about it. My Uncle Dave, I said, he's the black sheep. He hates Graham's pretension. He's been waiting 30 years to see someone stand up to him. Uncle Dave is the buffer. Tessa wrote down, I will brief him. His job is to stand next to you during the reception and interrupt any conversation that sounds like a business merger. Third, Tessa said, the private moment. Kennedy, you are not going to see your parents until you walk down the aisle. We are going to hide you. Hide me. We are going to bring you in through the kitchen entrance. You and Miles will have 20 minutes alone in the bridal suite before the ceremony. No moms, no dads, just you two. You need to anchor yourselves before you walk into the arena. I nodded. That sounded like heaven. We went over the contingencies. What if Graham grabs the microphone? The DJ has a kill switch. What if Lorraine causes a scene in the bathroom? Tessa goes in. What if the North Bay investors show up anyway? Security escorts them to the parking lot. It was sad, in a way, that we had to plan our wedding like a tactical extraction operation. But as we checked off the items, I felt the panic recede. Structure was my safety. Late that afternoon, Miles and I took a break to drive over to his sister's house. Renee Carter lived in a messy, chaotic split level on the other side of town. Her lawn was full of plastic toys, and her dog barked for 5 minutes when we arrived. It was the opposite of the Hayes household. It was loud, uncurated, and warm. Renee poured us iced tea in plastic cups and sat us down at her sticky kitchen table. So, she said, brushing a stray Cheerio off the placemat, I hear World War III is scheduled for tomorrow. Pretty much, Miles said. Kennedy, Renee said, looking at me with kind, tired eyes. I want to tell you something. I braced myself for advice about forgiveness. People always told you to forgive family because blood is thicker than water. You are going to feel guilty. Renee said. I looked at her, surprised. You are going to stand there tomorrow and see your parents looking miserable, and you are going to feel like the worst daughter on the planet. You are going to want to fix it. You are going to want to cave just to make them smile. Yes, I whispered. That is exactly how I feel. Don't, Renee said. She leaned forward. Creating a new family means letting the old family be disappointed. Kennedy. You cannot build a life with Miles if you are busy maintaining the shrine to Graham and Lorraine. You have to let them be angry. You have to let them be embarrassed. That is not your burden. That is their choice. She reached out and squeezed my hand. You are breaking a cycle, she said, and breaking things makes noise. Let it be noisy. I left her house feeling lighter than I had in days. Let it be noisy. That night, the eve of my wedding, I couldn't sleep. The cottage was quiet. Miles was breathing softly beside me. I got up and went to the kitchen table. I pulled out a piece of notebook paper and a pen. I needed to write it down. I needed to solidify the resolve before the emotions of the day washed it away. Dear Kennedy, tomorrow, you are going to be afraid. You are going to see your father's face, and he will look like a thundercloud. You will see your mother crying, and she will look fragile. Do not freeze. Remember that their anger is not about you. It is about their loss of control. You are not their asset. You are not their retirement plan. You are not their bait for a merger. If Graham yells, lower your voice. If Lorraine cries, hand her a tissue and walk away. You have paid for this day. You have paid for your freedom. Do not give a refund just because they make a scene. You are the CEO of your own life. Act like it. Love me. I folded the letter and put it in my clutch, right next to the lipstick and the tissues. As I was turning off the light, my phone buzzed. A text from Elliot Price. I have confirmed with Maris Calder. She is bringing the estate ledger. We will be there. Sleep well. Kennedy, the cavalry is coming. I stared at the screen. Maris Calder, the executor, the woman who held the keys to the dormant holdings. I didn't know exactly what she was going to do, or what the ledger would prove, but I knew one thing: my father was expecting a submissive daughter to walk down that aisle. He was expecting a girl who would nod at his investors and sign his papers. He was going to be very surprised to meet the woman who showed up instead. I went back to bed and curled up next to Miles. For the first time in a week, I didn't dream about drowning. I dreamed about the ocean, wide and open and belonging to no one but itself. The humidity had broken, leaving the air in Harbor Cove crisp and smelling of charcoal and roasted peppers. We had chosen a place called the Salty Lime for the rehearsal dinner, A local taco spot with a sprawling back patio strung with Edison bulbs and picnic tables painted in bright, peeling turquoise. It was the antithesis of the yacht club dinner my parents had originally booked. It was loud, it was unpretentious, and it was exactly what Miles and I wanted. But as I walked onto the patio, holding Miles's hand, I felt the familiar tightening in my stomach. It wasn't the venue, it was the guests. Graham and Lorraine Hayes had arrived early. They were easy to spot. Amidst the crowd of my college friends in denim and Miles's teacher colleagues in khakis, my parents looked like they had been airdropped from a different planet. My father was wearing a navy blazer with gold buttons that gleamed under the string lights, and my mother was in a silk sheath dress that probably cost more than the venue's monthly lease. They were smiling. That was the first warning sign. They were moving through the crowd of 20 guests with the practiced grace of politicians working a room. I watched my father clap Miles's best man, a guy named Dave who coached wrestling, on the shoulder. I saw my mother laughing delicately at something Miles's sister Renee said, though I knew she likely found Renee's messy hair and loud laugh distasteful. They were charming. They were radiant. They were acting as if the last 4 days of warfare had never happened. Kennedy. My mother cried out when she saw me. She rushed over, her heels clicking on the patio pavers. She kissed the air next to my cheek. You look exhausted, darling, but happy. That is what matters. She squeezed my arm. Her grip was tight, her nails digging in just enough to be noticeable. We were just telling your friends how thrilled we are to be hosting everyone, she said, pitching her voice loud enough for the table nearby to hear. It is so important to us that our guests are comfortable. I pulled my arm back gently. They are comfortable. Mom, tacos usually have that effect. Graham walked up behind her, holding a scotch he must have ordered from the premium list inside. As the salty lime usually served margaritas in plastic cups, it is a quaint spot. Kennedy, he said, looking around with a benevolent sneer. Very authentic. We are just happy to facilitate. It is a big weekend for the Hayes family. There it was, the subtle rebranding. It wasn't Miles and Kennedy's wedding. It was a Hayes family weekend. They were planting flags in the soil I had already reclaimed. We sat down for dinner. I had arranged the seating carefully, long communal tables, so there was no head table, just a mix of people. I sat between Miles and Tessa. I placed my parents across from us, flanked by Uncle Dave, the designated buffer, and Renee. The servers brought out platters of tacos, bowls of guacamole, and buckets of beer. The atmosphere should have been loose, but the air around my parents rippled with tension every time someone laughed. My father looked up with a tight smile, as if checking to see if the laughter was approved. When the chatter died down slightly, I stood up. I tapped my fork against my glass bottle of soda. "Hi, everyone," I said. My voice was steady, though my knees felt like water. "I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming to Harbor Cove. And thank you for being the people who have actually supported us. Miles and I wanted tonight to be simple. We wanted to look around this table and see our real family, the people who know us." I looked at Miles, then at Renee, then at Tessa. I let my gaze sweep over my parents, but I didn't linger. Tomorrow is about joining two lives. I continued. It is about building a future on our own terms. So eat, drink, and thank you for loving us without conditions. Cheers. Cheers, the table erupted. I sat down. I hadn't thanked my parents. I hadn't mentioned their generosity. I hadn't given them the credit they believed they were owed for simply existing. My father's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat and dead. He took a long sip of his scotch. A moment later, my Aunt Linda stood up. Linda was my father's younger sister, a woman who had spent her entire life trying to please Graham. She was wearing a dress that matched my mother's color palette, a clear sign of who had dressed her. "Can I say a few words?" she asked, her voice high and nervous. I couldn't exactly say no. "I just want to add," Linda said, clutching her napkin, "that weddings are such a beautiful time to reflect on where we come from. Kennedy, you are so lucky to have parents who care so much." She looked at Graham, who nodded imperceptibly. I think we all need to remember that none of this would be possible without the guidance and support of the older generation. Linda continued, "It is a biblical truth. Honor thy father and mother. It is the foundation of a good life. So let's raise a glass to Graham and Lorraine for everything they have done to make this weekend and Kennedy's life what it is. It was a heat-seeking missile of a toast. It was designed to shame me, to remind everyone of the hierarchy, and to force me to publicly acknowledge their dominance." The table went quiet. A few people raised their glasses awkwardly. Miles's friends looked confused. Tessa looked like she was about to throw a taco. I felt the heat rise up my neck. I wanted to stand up and scream that they hadn't paid for the tacos, that they hadn't paid for the venue, that they were currently trying to sue my business. But then I felt Miles's hand under the table. He squeezed my fingers 3 times. "I love you." I remembered the rules. No public fights. I didn't stand up. I didn't glare. I simply picked up my taco and took a bite. I let the silence stretch. I let Linda stand there, glass raised, waiting for my validation. When it didn't come, the moment curdled. It became awkward not for me, but for her. "Thank you, Linda," my father said finally, his voice cutting through the tension. Linda sat down, looking flushed. The conversation started up again, but it was brittle. My parents ate quickly, picking at the food as if they were afraid it might be contaminated, as the plates were being cleared. My father stood up and buttoned his blazer. "Kennedy," he said, "a word." Now I asked, "Just for a moment, over there." He pointed to a quiet corner of the patio, away from the tables. I looked at Miles. He nodded slightly. "Go, but be fast." I walked over to where my father was standing. He was silhouetted against the dark harbor water. He looked impressive. I had to admit, he looked like a man who owned the coast, but I knew now that he was just a man who knew how to pose. That was quite a performance. "Kennedy," he said quietly, "I didn't perform anything. Dad, I just thanked my guests. You humiliated your aunt, and you disrespected us. Again." I crossed my arms. "I am not going to argue with you. Dad, if you are unhappy, you can leave." Graham laughed. A low, dry sound. "Leave and miss the main event. No, I have too much invested." He reached into his inner jacket pocket for a second. I thought he was going to pull out a checkbook. Instead, he pulled out a folded document. "I'm going to offer you a deal," he said. "A reset button." He unfolded the paper. It was short, maybe 3 paragraphs. "I will write a check tonight for the full $60,000, he said. "I will cover the venue, the catering, the flowers you canceled, everything. You can have your dream wedding back. I will even tell the North Bay people to stay in the background. No speeches, no introduction line." I looked at him. "And what do I have to do?" "Just sign this," he said. He held it out. I didn't take it, but I leaned in to read under the dim light of the Edison bulb. Memorandum of Family Understanding. The undersigned acknowledges that Graham and Lorraine Hayes are the primary benefactors of the Hayes family estate. The undersigned agrees to consult with the benefactors regarding any major financial decisions, public statements, or legal alterations to family entities for a period of 5 years. It was the advisory consent clause again, but this time, it was broader. Public statements, legal alterations. He was trying to block me from claiming the trust. He was trying to block me from removing him from my LLC. He knew I had met with Nina. He knew I was making moves. This was his attempt to shackle me before I could run. "You want me to sign away my autonomy for $60,000, I asked. "I want you to show some loyalty." Graham hissed. "This isn't about control, Kennedy. It is about protection. You are about to make a mess. You are listening to that bitter old man, Elliot Price. You are listening to that shark lawyer, Feldman. They don't love you. We love you." I looked at the paper, then up at his face. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was desperate. He needed my signature because without it, he was exposed. "No," I said. Graham froze. "What did you say?" I said, "No, I don't want your money. And I am not signing your treaty. Kennedy, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I am declining a bad business deal." Graham's face changed. The fatherly concern vanished, replaced by the cold, hard look of a man who was used to crushing competitors. He folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. "You are making a mistake," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like grinding stones. "You think you are independent. You are nothing without the Hayes name. You are a consultant with a small client list and a smaller bank account. I have enough." I said, "You have nothing," he snapped. Loud enough that a few people at the nearby tables turned to look. He lowered his voice again, leaning in so close I could smell the scotch on his breath. "If you walk down that aisle tomorrow without signing this, you are declaring war, and I promise you, Kennedy, you will regret humiliating us in front of people who matter. People who matter." I repeated, "You mean the investors? I mean the people who hold the future," Graham said. I looked over his shoulder. I saw Miles watching me, ready to spring from his seat. I saw Tessa glaring. I saw my friends. "The people who matter are sitting right there," I said, "and you are not one of them anymore." Graham stared at me with pure venom. Then he stepped back. "We will see how brave you are tomorrow," he said. He turned and walked back to the table. He tapped my mother on the shoulder. She stood up immediately, sensing the shift in his energy. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't wave. They just walked out of the patio gate, heads high, leaving a wake of silence behind them. I stood there for a moment, shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer voltage of the adrenaline. I walked back to the table. "Everything okay?" Miles asked, taking my hand. He tried to get me to sign a contract. I said, I refused. "Good," Tessa said. "Let's do a shot." I sat down, trying to steady my breathing. I looked around the patio, trying to ground myself in the reality of the taco baskets and the sticky table. That was when I saw them. Near the bar, just inside the glass doors of the restaurant, 3 men were standing. They were not wearing the casual clothes of the usual salty lime patrons. They were wearing charcoal suits. They were holding tumblers of dark liquor. They were looking at me. I recognized one of them from the LinkedIn search I had done on North Bay Meridian Group. It was their CFO, a man named Sterling. My blood ran cold. "Tessa," I whispered, "look at the bar. Don't turn your head too fast." Tessa adjusted her glasses and glanced over. "Who are the suits?" she asked. "That is North Bay," I said. "What? How we wipe them from the list. This is a private dinner. They aren't technically at the dinner," I said. "They are at the bar. It is a public restaurant, but they are watching us." Miles noted, his jaw tightening. I stood up again. I walked over to the hostess stand, where the restaurant manager, a nice guy named Jorge, was organizing menus. "Jorge," I said, "I have a question." The men at the bar. "The ones in the suits. Did they have a reservation?" Jorge looked up. "Oh, the Smith party. Yeah, they called an hour ago. Said they were friends of the family. Just wanted to have a drink nearby. They put $100 in the tip jar to hold that high-top table. Friends of the family." I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. "Lorraine, so sorry we had to dash. Graham is feeling unwell. Make sure you say hello to Mr. Sterling at the bar. He was so eager to see the happy couple." I stared at the phone. She had set this up. She knew I had removed them from the wedding list, so she had invited them here, to the rehearsal, using a fake name for the reservation so I wouldn't catch it. She was trying to force the interaction I had blocked. I looked back at the bar. "Mr. Sterling raised his glass to me, a smug, proprietary toast. He expected me to walk over. He expected me to introduce Miles. He expected me to play the game. I turned to Jorge. "Jorge," I said, "those men are bothering me." "Bothering you?" Jorge frowned. "They haven't come out to the patio. They are stalking my wedding party," I said, "and I would like them to leave." Jorge looked at the men, then back at me. He saw the distress in my face. "Okay," he said, "it is your night. I will handle it." I watched as Jorge walked over to the bar. I saw him speak to Mr. Sterling. I saw Sterling point to his drink, then to the patio. Looking indignant, Jorge pointed to the door. There was a brief standoff. Then, Sterling sneered, threw a bill on the counter, and motioned to his 2 associates. They turned and walked out. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, but the victory felt hollow. They were here. They were in Harbor Cove, and they were persistent. I went back to the table. "They are gone," I said. "But we have a problem." What Tessa asked. "My mother is using guerrilla tactics." I said, "She invited them under a fake name. If she did it tonight, she will do it tomorrow. She will tell them to come as +1s or use different names at the gate." Tessa pulled out her phone. "Then we go to DEFCON 1, she said. "I need the check-in to be airtight." I told her. Tessa was already typing. "I am texting Sarah at the venue. Here is the new protocol, no +1s unless the specific name of the guest is on the list. If a guest shows up with someone not named, the +1 waits in the car." "That is harsh," Miles said. "It is necessary," I said. "And IDs. I want IDs checked for anyone we don't recognize visually. If Mr. Smith shows up, I want to see a driver's license. And if my parents try to vouch for them," I asked. Tessa looked up, her eyes fierce. "Then security tells your parents that the bride has veto power. Any conflict goes to Sarah. Sarah comes to me. You do not get involved. You do not even know it is happening." I nodded. It was extreme. It was paranoid. But as I thought about Graham's threat, "You will regret humiliating us," I knew it was the only way. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nina. "Nina. Just checking in. I assume the peace talks failed." I stepped away from the table to reply. "Kennedy failed spectacularly. He tried to get me to sign a rights waiver. And North Bay crashed the rehearsal. Nina, document it. Everything. Write down exactly what he asked you to sign. Screenshot your mother's texts about the Smith party. Save the voicemail if he leaves one. Kennedy." "It feels dirty. It's my wedding." Nina. "It is a legal defense file now." Kennedy. "I am sorry, but you will thank me on Monday." I did as she asked. I screenshotted the texts. I opened my notes app and typed out the content of the Memorandum of Family Understanding while it was still fresh in my memory. I listed the names of the men at the bar. It felt cold. It felt clinical. I was building a dossier against my own father on the night before my wedding. I felt a wave of grief wash over me. So heavy I had to lean against the patio railing. Why couldn't they just love me? Why couldn't they just be happy that I found a good man? Why did everything have to be a transaction? I felt a hand on my back. It was Miles. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, letting his warmth seep into my cold, shaking frame. "You okay?" he asked after a minute. "No," I said. "I hate this. I know. I hate that I have to treat them like enemies. They chose the battlefield. Ken, you are just defending the hill." We stood there for a while, listening to the laughter of our friends behind us. They were oblivious to the shadow war happening at the periphery. They were just happy to be eating tacos. "Let's go home," I said. We said our goodbyes. We told everyone to get some sleep. We hugged Uncle Dave and reminded him of his buffer duties. We drove back to the cottage in the dark. The stars were out, bright and hard above the ocean. When we got inside, we were both wired but exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving us hungry again. We hadn't really eaten at the dinner. "I have leftover pizza in the fridge," Miles said, "and warm beer." "Sounds like a feast," I said. We sat on the couch in the semi-darkness, eating cold pepperoni pizza from the box. It was quiet. The only sound was the clock ticking and the distant ocean. I looked at Miles. He looked tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. "I am sorry," I said. "For what? For dragging you into this. This isn't exactly the romantic build-up you deserve." Miles put his pizza crust down. He turned to me, his expression serious. "Kennedy, do not apologize. I learned more about you in the last 4 days than I did in the last 4 years. Is that a good thing?" "Yeah, it is. I saw you stand up to a hurricane. I saw you protect us. That is the sexiest thing I have ever seen." I laughed, a choked little sound. "I don't feel sexy. I feel like a litigation attorney." Miles smiled. "I am done. I said suddenly. The words just tumbled out. Done with what I am done being bought. I said it louder, testing the weight of it. I am done being bought. I spent my whole life thinking that their money was love. I thought that if I just followed the rules, if I just earned the scholarship, if I just got the right job, if I just married the right way, they would finally be satisfied. But they are a bottomless pit. Miles, you can't fill a pit with obedience. I took a breath. Tomorrow, I walk down that aisle, and I am not walking toward them. I am walking away from them, and I am walking toward you. Miles reached out and cupped my face. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. Then we will build something no one can take. He said, we will build a house with no strings attached. We will have kids who don't have to earn their dinner. We will have a life that is small and messy and ours. Ours, I whispered. He kissed me. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was a seal, a promise. We finished the pizza. We checked the locks on the doors, a habit I had picked up from living in a city. But tonight it felt symbolic. We were locking them out. I went to the bedroom and saw my wedding dress hanging on the back of the door. It was simple, white, and paid for with my own credit card. I looked at it and didn't feel anxiety anymore. I felt a strange, cold clarity. My father had promised I would regret humiliating them. But as I climbed into bed, I realized he had it backward. I wasn't going to humiliate them. The truth was going to humiliate them. All I was going to do was open the door and let it in. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow was the war. And for the first time in my life, I was the one commanding the army. The morning of my wedding did not feel like a fairy tale. It felt like the quiet hum of a server room before a system reboot. I woke up at 6 a.m, listening to the gulls crying over the harbor. The sky was a pale, washed-out gray, the kind that promised heat later in the day. Beside me, Miles was sleeping with one arm thrown over his eyes, breathing the deep, heavy rhythm of a man who had exhausted himself protecting me. I slipped out of bed and went to the window. I held the letter I had written to myself the night before. I didn't need to unfold it to know what it said. Do not freeze. I took a shower, letting the hot water scrub away the residue of the rehearsal dinner, the tension, the fake smiles, the smell of my father's expensive cologne that seemed to linger in my nose. When I stepped out and wiped the steam from the mirror, I looked at my reflection. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes. But there was also something else, a hardness. The soft, pliable daughter who used to apologize for taking up space was gone. In her place was a woman who was about to audit her own life. I put on my robe and walked into the kitchen. Tessa was already there, drinking coffee and looking at her phone with the intensity of a stockbroker during a crash. "Morning," she said, not looking up. "What is it?" I asked. Tessa hesitated. She put the phone down on the counter. "I just got a text from Sarah at the venue, and there was an update to the guest list file at 3 a.m. I felt a cold drop in my stomach. "Who updated it?" I asked. "Someone using a login from the catering company." Tessa said, "They added 10 names. The Thorne family, the Sterlings, a few others, and they changed the seating chart to put them at table 1. I walked over and looked at the phone. There it was. A screenshot of the digital file. The names were there, bold and undeniable. "My mother," I said. "She must have bullied a catering intern late last night. She probably told them it was a critical oversight and slipped them $100. Tessa looked at me. "What do you want to do?" I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt a wave of icy clarity. "We go to the venue," I said. "We fix it, and we lock the doors." We arrived at the Harbor View Club at 8 a.m. The venue was beautiful, a sprawling white building overlooking the Atlantic, but I didn't have time to admire the view. I marched straight into the coordinator's office. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept. She held up a clipboard. "Kennedy, I am so sorry." She started. "I don't know how. It doesn't matter how." I said, taking the clipboard, "Delete them. But the catering count. Eat the cost." I said, "We pay for the plates, but we do not set the places." I took a Sharpie from her desk. I crossed out the added names with thick, black strokes. Here's the protocol, I said, my voice steady. You are going to print this list. You are going to give a copy to every security guard and every usher. If a name is not on this paper, they do not enter. I don't care if they are wearing a tuxedo. I don't care if they say they are the Pope. And if your parents make a scene, Sarah asked, then you come get me, I said. I went to the bridal suite to get ready. The room was quiet. My dress hung in the corner, a simple silk slip dress that moved like water. It was elegant, understated, and completely devoid of the pearls and lace my mother had wanted. Tessa and Renee helped me into it. There was no champagne. There was no giddy laughter. We were focused. At 11 in the morning, the guests began to arrive. I watched from the window of the suite. Hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain, I saw my friends. I saw Mrs. Higgins, my old teacher. I saw the people who loved us. Then I saw the silver sedan. Graham and Lorraine Hayes stepped out. They were dressed for a royal wedding. My father was in a mourning suit with tails, ridiculous for a seaside wedding, and my mother was wearing a hat that looked like a satellite dish. They were not alone. Behind them, getting out of a black SUV, were 5 other people. I recognized Mr. Sterling from the bar. I recognized Marcus Thorne, the CEO of North Bay. They were trying to brute force their way in. I watched as they approached the entrance. My father was smiling, gesturing grandly to the building as if he had built it himself. He walked up to the check-in table where Tessa's cousin Mike was standing with the clipboard. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I saw the body language. My father pointed to the group behind him. Mike looked at the list. Mike shook his head. My father's smile faltered. He pointed again, more aggressively. He gestured to my mother. Mike didn't move. He tapped the clipboard. My father's face turned a dark, furious red. He leaned over the table. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Code red at the front desk. Your father is threatening to sue the security guard. I turned to Miles, who was fixing his tie in the mirror. It is time, I said. We walked down the hallway. I didn't go to the front door. I went to the side entrance of the lobby, where I could see everything but remain separated by the crowd. My father was shouting now. This is preposterous. I am the father of the bride. These are my guests, sir, Mike said, his voice calm and bored. The list is the list. Kennedy Hayes approved this document this morning. Kennedy is confused, my mother chimed in, her voice shrill. She is under a lot of stress. We are the hosts. I stepped out from the hallway. I am not confused. I said. The sound of my voice cut through the lobby. The guests who had already entered fell silent. My father whipped around. Kennedy, he roared. Tell this imbecile to let Mr. Thorne in. This is embarrassing. I looked at Mr. Thorne. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He was a man used to boardrooms, not sidewalk confrontations. Mr. Thorne, I said politely, I apologize for the confusion. My parents seem to have extended invitations that were not theirs to give. This is a private event. You are not on the guest list. Thorne looked at my father. Graham. What is going on? Graham looked like he was going to explode. He marched toward me. Ignoring the security guard who stepped forward to intercept him, Kennedy, he hissed, stopping 3 feet away. Fix this, now, or I swear to you, you swear what I asked, that you will cut me off, that you will ruin me. I pointed to the door. Send them away, Dad, or you can leave with them. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. His hand twitched, but then he looked around. He saw the faces of my friends, my colleagues, the people of Harbor Cove. He saw the security guards. He saw that he had no power here. He turned back to the investors. There has been a misunderstanding, he stammered. Please, head to the hotel bar. I will sort this out and join you shortly. The investors didn't say goodbye. They just turned and walked away, their stiff backs radiating irritation. My mother looked like she was going to faint. She grabbed my father's arm. How could you? She whispered to me. How could you do this to us? I didn't answer. I turned to Mike. Let my parents in. I said, just them. I walked back toward the reception hall, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had done it. I had turned them away. But the real blow was yet to come. I walked into the main room, where the welcome board and seating chart were displayed on a rustic easel. My parents followed me, seething. "I need to speak with you privately," Graham said, his voice shaking with rage. "Immediately." "Not yet." I said, "Look at the chart. Dad." He scanned the names, probably checking to see if I had removed anyone else. His eyes stopped at table 4, Elliot Price, Maris Calder. I saw the recognition hit him like a physical slap. His face went pale. He blinked, as if trying to clear a hallucination. "Price," he whispered, "why is he here?" "And who is Maris Calder?" my mother asked. Sensing the shift in his mood, my father looked at me. The anger was gone, replaced by a sudden, jagged fear. "Kennedy," he said, "why did you invite Elliot?" "Because I wanted to know the truth." I said, "We need to talk." He said, "Now? A room? Anywhere?" I nodded. "The green room." I said. I signaled to Miles and Tessa. They fell in behind me. We walked into the small room off the main hall. It was filled with spare chairs and audio equipment. My father closed the door and leaned against it, as if trying to bar the exit. "What did he tell you?" Graham demanded. "That old drunk? He has been out of the loop for years. He doesn't know anything about the current portfolio." I didn't answer. I looked at the door. It opened, and Elliot Price walked in. Beside him was a woman I had never met. She was tall, wearing a charcoal suit, and carrying a thick leather briefcase. She looked like she was made of titanium. "Hello?" "Graham," Elliot said pleasantly. Graham didn't speak. He looked at the briefcase. "And you must be Maris," Graham said, his voice tight. "Maris Calder," the woman said. She didn't offer her hand. She walked over to a table and set the briefcase down. The click of the latches opening sounded like a gunshot in the small room. "I am here in my capacity as the executor of the Eleanor Hayes retained estate," Maris said. My mother looked between them, confused. "Retained estate?" she asked. "Graham, what is she talking about? Everything is in the family trust. You manage it." Graham didn't look at her. He was staring at Maris. "This is not the time," he said. "My daughter is getting married in 20 minutes. Actually," Maris said, pulling a file from the case. "This is the perfect time." Kennedy asked for clarity. She turned to me. "Kennedy, your father has told you that your trust fund is subject to his advisory consent and management until you reach the age of 35. "Correct, yes," I said, "and that the funds are currently tied up in long-term family holding vehicles that cannot be liquidated without his signature." "Yes." Maris handed me a document. "This is the original trust instrument signed by your grandmother," she said. I looked at the paper. It was the same one Elliot had shown me. But this was the official, notarized copy, vesting age 30, trustee powers, absolute. "And this," Maris continued, handing me a second sheet, "is a bank statement from a holding account in the Cayman Islands." I looked at the numbers. The balance was staggering. "Graham," Maris said, her voice cool and professional, "you have been moving the dividends from Kennedy's trust into your own operational accounts for 3 years. You have been using her capital to secure your loans for the North Bay merger. You told the bank you had her consent." She looked at him. "Did you have her consent?" The room was silent. My mother let out a small, strangled sound. "Graham," she whispered, "is that true?" My father straightened his tie. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Kennedy, you don't understand business. It is all liquidity. It is all the same pot. I was growing the principal for you. I was protecting you. If I had given you that money at 30, you would have spent it. You would have been reckless. I was building an empire for you to inherit. You were stealing." I said, "It was management," he shouted. "I am the head of this family. I decide how the resources are deployed." Elliot stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. The envelope was yellowed with age. "Eleanor knew." "Graham," Elliot said softly. "She knew you couldn't help yourself." He handed the letter to me. I opened it. My grandmother's handwriting was spidery but firm. "My dearest Kennedy, If you are reading this, it means you have finally asked the question I prayed you would ask. Do not let them make you feel small. Do not let them trade love for control. The money is yours. But the freedom is more important. Walk your own path. And never let him sign your name. Love, Grandma. I lowered the letter. Tears were stinging my eyes. But they didn't fall. It is over. Dad, I said. Graham looked at the documents, then at the door, then at me. He looked smaller. The grand patriarch, the captain of industry, was just a man who had embezzled from his own daughter to keep up appearances. I can fix this, he muttered. I can shift the funds back. The North Bay deal closes next month. Once the capital comes in, I will make you whole. Kennedy, please, if you expose this, the merger dies. The SEC gets involved. I could go to prison. I looked at Miles. He was watching me with fierce pride. I am not going to expose you. I said. Graham exhaled, his shoulders sagging. Thank God. But, I continued, you are going to sign the release, right now. What release Nina's document? I said. I pulled the folder from my bag. Termination of advisory consent and release of claims, and you are going to sign a resignation as trustee. Maris has the papers. Graham stared at me. If I sign that, I lose the leverage with North Bay. If you don't sign it, I said. Maris walks out that door and calls the district attorney. Graham looked at Maris. She nodded once. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed the documents. My mother started to cry. It wasn't a gentle weeping. It was a loud, gasping sob. How can you be so cold, she wailed. Looking at me. We did everything for you. We gave you the best schools, the best clothes, the best life. We sacrificed everything. I looked at her. I felt a profound pity. She had been his accomplice and his victim all at once. You did things to keep me, I said softly. That is not the same as doing things for me. I took the signed papers and handed them to Maris. Thank you, I said. I turned to my parents. You can stay. I said, you can sit in the audience and watch me get married. But you are not the hosts. You are not the benefactors. You are just guests. And if you say one single word to anyone about business, security will escort you out. I took Miles's hand. Let's go get married, I said. We walked out of the green room. The ceremony was held on the lawn, overlooking the ocean. The wind had died down, leaving the air still and sweet. I didn't have my father walk me down the aisle. I walked myself. I walked past the rows of white chairs. I saw the faces of my friends, smiling, wiping away tears. I saw Elliot Price in the back row, dipping his head in a respectful bow. I saw my parents. They were sitting in the front row, where they felt they belonged, but they looked diminished. My father was staring at his shoes. My mother was clutching her purse like a shield. They looked like strangers who had stumbled into the wrong party. When I reached the altar, Miles took my hands. His palms were warm. The officiant, a friend of ours, started the service. It wasn't the traditional script my father had demanded. It was about partnership. It was about choosing each other every day. We exchanged vows. I promised to be honest. I promised to be brave. When we turned to face the crowd as husband and wife, I scanned the audience. I saw a movement in the back. Mr. Sterling and the other North Bay executives, who had apparently been lingering in the parking lot hoping for a reprieve, were getting into their cars. They had realized the power play was over. The Hayes family was not a unified front. The asset was not secured. I watched them drive away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. I didn't care about the optics. I didn't care about the legacy. I looked at Miles. We did it, he whispered. We walked back up the aisle, showered in rose petals that we had paid for ourselves. The reception was nothing like the gala my parents had planned. It was a party. We ate tacos. We drank beer from bottles. We danced to bad 80s music. My parents stayed for an hour. They sat at their table, accepting polite congratulations. But they didn't dance. They didn't make a speech. They existed in a bubble of silence. When they finally stood up to leave, I walked over to them. Goodbye, I said. My father looked at me. His eyes were empty. He looked like a man who was trying to calculate the salvage value of a wreck. You are making a mistake, he said automatically. It was a reflex. I smiled. Maybe, I said, but it is my mistake to make. My mother kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. Call us, she said. When you come to your senses, they walked out into the night. I watched them go, and I felt the final tether snap. The invisible leash that had been around my neck for 33 years was gone. I turned back to the dance floor. Miles was waiting for me. He spun me around, and I laughed. A sound that came from the bottom of my lungs. I was not Kennedy Hayes, the asset. I was Kennedy Carter, the woman who owned herself. We had no safety net. We had no family fortune to fall back on, at least. Not until the legal battle for the trust was finished. We had an uncertain future, but as I looked around the room at the people who stayed, the people who cheered, the people who loved us for free, I knew we had everything we needed. I was done being bought, and I was just getting started living. Thank you for journeying with Kennedy through the wreckage of the Hayes family dynamic. Writing revenge stories isn't just about the gotcha moment. It's about the reclamation of the self. I hope Kennedy's victory resonated with you. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with family? Please share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the sweet taste of turning the tables. Until next time, keep your boundaries high and your dignity higher.